I'm gonna be speaking about a certain type of musical genre that was and is very important to me. I forgot where I had heard this, but and it's true that music becomes autobiographical, and I firmly believe that. To me, the New Jack Swing era was from 1988, or the heights of it, 1988 all the way through 1994, 1995. And the reason why I say it's very special to me was because it's the type of music that I gravitated towards most as a kid, as a teen growing up, going through all these different emotions, changes, and you're finding who you are. You're discovering. You're going through so much between junior high all the way throughout high school, and there were so many great albums that came out during this era. Albums were huge, and I remember finding out when the new Blackstreet album was coming out, the new Guy album, the new Keith Sweat album, the new I'll Be Sure, and it like I said, spawned so much great music. I remember as well, besides following groups, following individual singers in this genre, soundtracks were big, were huge. And what I mean by that is I'm talking about the time in high school. When I was in high school in the early 90's, seeing people carry the cassette. Cassettes were huge back then. Cassettes were CDs came. The CD boom was in the early 90's, but people still bought cassettes as well. People carrying around different cassettes and just sharing them, and listening to them on their Walkman, and your friends are listening to this album and they let you listen to it, and it spawned a lot of great conversations and great memories. I'm in my 40s now, and at this point in my life, I listen to so many different genres of music, anything. Except I have my exceptions, obviously. But New Jack Swing, like I said, was and is very important to me because it is autobiographical in terms of remembering begging my mom to take me to Sam Goody, which was a music shop, in usually located at the malls. The Warehouse, which later became Warehouse Music. I grew up in San Gabriel Valley. There was a store called Music Plus, Tower Records, and I remember every time I got good grades, showing my mom the grades and her promising a cassette or a CD. So many different memories. Liking a girl in high school, and you connect this song to that girl, like a girl that I was absolutely in love with in high school, and I always remember till this day. Always remember Guy's "Piece of My Love," and I'm remembering that girl. So, there's a lot of connections here. That's why it's special to me. But apart from that, the music is absolutely amazing. What I think it was genius from Teddy Riley starting this was fusing hip hop and R&B together. I thought that was amazing. The voices, the slow jams, the dance tracks. I mean, I'm not a dancer or anything like that, but I appreciated just watching these artists dance on videos, and listening to tapes in the car, and certain the groups that came out of this was, first of all, I would say Bobby Brown in 1988, Don't Be Cruel. That album was huge, and the sound was just different. It seemed like this was a transition from your typical R&B at the time to a different type of sound, and it was Teddy Riley behind it. Then we got groups like, in no particular order, but just out of memory, Bobby Brown, I'll Be Sure, Keith Sweat, SWV, Blackstreet, a group called Portrait, um, so many different groups, which I'm gonna be starting to review albums of different genres, and I am gonna put a playlist under New Jack Swing, because there's so many, uh, like I said, great, amazing albums. And I think this genre of music, New Jack Swing, I would say it's underrated. You don't hear too much about it. Um, Obviously, a lot of people, that grew up when I grew up in the late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s, know about this genre. Know how influential, remember how influential it was. And um, buying music was exciting, was an occasion. Was it just like I said, takes me back and brings back a lot of memories. Um, Apart from following individual singers and groups, soundtracks were huge. Soundtracks were huge. I remember the House Party 2 soundtrack was big. Um, Boomerang was huge with Eddie Murphy. The soundtrack, the Mo Money soundtrack. To me, I remember it was always Mo Money and Boomerang. Mo Money, Boomerang. Listening to those all the time. The House Party 2 soundtrack, like I mentioned, is one of my absolute favorites from the time that wore that cassette out. Then I bought the CD, and very, very, very cool moment in time. Janet Jackson, also her albums. The Dangerous album by Michael Jackson. A lot of tracks were produced by Teddy Riley. Besides the soundtracks, producers were huge. So whenever I saw an album, whenever I bought an album or would check them out at the store, I would found myself looking for produced by Teddy Riley, produced by L.A. Reid, produced by Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, because I knew these albums were gonna be awesome. So I started. Remember back then, and in that time, there was no Google, there was no YouTube, so it was just either word of mouth or discovering it for yourself. And that's something that I did, just following those names. And I remember going to the R&B section and looking for albums specifically produced by those individuals, produced by Teddy Riley. And it's just a great moment in time that I think people should. And I'm happy I have the albums. I still have them. I still have the CDs. Um, the ones that I have lost in transition from moving, I replaced them because I, like I said, listen to all types of music, and that's one genre that I still listen to. I never understand, and to each their own, but I don't understand the mentality of, oh, I don't listen to that anymore because that sounds dated, or this sounds dated, that singer sounds dated. It sounds good, it sounds good. And another thing I want to add is soundtracks were huge, like I said, but movies associated with the New Jack Swing era. You have New Jack City, you have tracks in Boys in the Hood soundtrack, Poetic Justice, the Juice soundtrack, you have Who's the Man soundtrack. Yeah. So, movies. So, also, what I remember to finalize this is remembering when this type of music, in my opinion, in my experience, and the location where I grew up, when I noticed that this started fading out in the suburbs of Los Angeles, California. Once two albums that were influential and extremely influential, and I love the albums so much, but I remember at the time I didn't understand what was going on, because it was pretty much like an overnight thing. When Dr. Dre's The Chronic came out, that just changed completely the dynamic of music, and what people started listening to. Also, Nirvana's Nevermind. People who were heavily into the New Jack Swing, they just started getting into both. That's what one thing that looking back I really liked about growing up in the suburbs in LA, that people weren't really just into one genre. There were many different genres that I noticed and I absorbed, and but yeah, those two albums, I noticed most people were, while I was like, hey, what about this? Check this out. Check out the new Blackstreet. They're like, no, check out the new Nirvana album. This album's amazing. Or the new Dr. Dre came out with a solo album called The Chronic. And I was like, wait a second, what's going on? Because this music was completely different. So that's when I started noticing New Jack Swing started to fade out where I grew up. So yeah, I think you should look up New Jack Swing era if you're interested in it, or if you did grow up in that era that I grew up in. You know, checking out the albums again, revisiting it, and the sound, like I said, is the sound like no other hip hop or no other R&B. Like I said, they're fused together, and I thought that was genius from Teddy Riley. So.